thanks for joining me on another episode of Why Not Go, the channel dedicated to rock and roll, especially punk and the Sex Pistols. Well, this is a video that's not about punk or the Sex Pistols, but it's about a band who were inspired to start because of the Sex Pistols. Peterhook and Bernard Sumner went to their infamous gig in Manchester in 1976, June of 1976. And when Peterhook saw the Sex Pistols, he writes in this book that I bought recently, Unknown Pleasures, he writes that he was absolutely gobsmacked and was inspired to start a band, which he did. His first band was called Warsaw, and that later became Joy Division. Well, I've been asked by a few viewers to do a video on Joy Division, and it's taken me a long time to come around to doing it for a couple reasons. One, I wasn't sure I had enough to say or enough material. I'm just a fan. I saw them many times in London when I lived there. And the second reason why is because I was very sad, and I didn't know him personally, but when iancurtis died, I was very, very upset, as a lot of fans were, and it's kind of a painful. It's a painful place to go back to think of those times. But I've had a couple viewers say, can you do a video? And I guess if there's a couple of viewers, 2 or 3 viewers that want to see a Joy Division video, maybe some other people will like it too. So I hope you enjoy it. Well, I just played a video of the song Dead Souls. I love that song. And I moved to London in around June of 1978 with my friend Sue, who I went on the Sex Pistols followed the Sex Pistols on tour. And a couple months later, I saw Sid Vicious at the Electric Ballroom, and I did a video on it and talk about moving to London. So I can put a link to that in this video if you want to see that one. So when I moved to London, I stayed there for 2 years, the summer of 1978 to the summer of 1980. And I dropped out of college, and most of the time I was in London, I worked at Topshop, and I loved my job. And the music scene in London was very different than LA. I just wanted to kind of describe that a little bit. I liked the music scene in LA. There was a lot of really good punk bands, bands like the Germs, bands like the Dickies, the Weirdos, the Bags, X. They were excellent. But when I got to London, it felt like London music was really kind of in a different phase, like light years away from what was going on in LA. When I returned to LA in 1980, I felt that LA had kind of caught up, and there were lots of interesting bands like Wall of Voodoo. When I left LA in 1978, the bands were very straightforward punk, most of them, and I liked a lot of them, and it was great. But when I got to London, I just thought, oh my God, the music here seems to be just so moving forward so quickly. I thought, wow, English people, they move fast. I think PIL made a big impact on the music in London during that time. I went to their first show. I believe it was at the Rainbow. I know it was Christmas 1978. And then Susie and the Banshees, I think they were very much a part of the kind of new sound. And I heard the expression post-punk, and I remember thinking, is punk over already? Are we into post-punk? But yes, so in general, I just thought London really moved a lot faster, and the music scene was much more kind of diverse than LA. There were still punk bands in London, like the Damned or the Stranglers, or a lot of different bands. But there was lots of other stuff too, and I during that time, those 2 years, I saw lots of bands that were, you couldn't really describe them as punk, but I guess it was post-punk. And how I discovered Joy Division was I used to listen to John Peel, and I love John Peel. I know he passed away a while ago, about 20 years ago, and his radio show was so different than the radio show I was used to listening to in LA. I used to listen to Rodney Bingenheimer, who was fantastic, and he's still on Sirius XM radio. But Rodney has great taste in music, but Rodney's his whole manner was so different than John Peel. When I listened to John Peel, I felt like I was listening to a college professor, whereas Rodney Bingenheimer, no offense to him, but he sounded kind of like a giggly schoolgirl some of the time. He used to always say, it's all happening, and then he'd giggle. And whereas John Peel, I thought, oh my God, he sounds so intellectual. But I loved John Peel, and he's the one that turned me on to Joy Division. He was a very early proponent of Joy Division. I remember he started talking about them and playing them on his show, and I just thought, wow, I mean, this band sounds amazing. And they did at least 2 John Peel sessions, and I still have my 2 John Peel sessions. This one was done in January 1979, January 31st, 1979. And this one was done, let's see, in November 26th of 1979, so at the end of 79. And I love John. I have John Peel sessions on lots of bands, but I always loved his John Peel sessions, and I loved his show in general. And so he's the one that turned me on to a lot of bands during that time, including The Fall and I don't know, Cabaret Voltaire or Scritti Politti, Certain Ratio. I mean, just amazing, amazing bands. As I said, just coming from LA, which was still sort of in the sort of first phase of punk in 1978, and then coming to London, and I thought, oh my God, London music is so advanced compared to the rest of the world. So after listening to John Peel play Joy Division and talk about Joy Division, I thought, oh God, I want to go see them. So I'm glad I have this book, because I can look through the book and talk about the shows that I went to and the shows that I missed. And after one of the shows that I went to, I actually met the band. It was after they opened up for the Buzzcocks on the Buzzcocks tour. I met them at the bar after the show, all 4 members. So I'll talk about that as well, and why I still kick myself about that meeting. And I wanted to mention that if you're a Joy Division fan and never got a chance to see them live, I would highly recommend going to see Peterhook. He does a fantastic show. We went to see him in Orlando in 2018. I wasn't living here at the time, but we happened to be here. And I'll show a picture of myself with Peterhook after the show. And he was really nice. He just happened to be out in the parking lot talking, and we chatted with him, and he shook Joe's hand, and then Joe took this picture. And we talked a little bit. I asked him if he still lived in Manchester, and he said he did. And then we drove to see Peterhook again. This was probably around 2021 or so, and we were living in Orlando, but he wasn't playing Florida, so we drove to Atlanta, which is about 450 miles away, to see him, and it was well worth it. He does a fantastic show. I think his voice is even stronger than Bernard Sumner's. I can't say it's stronger than iancurtis, but he does just a wonderful, brilliant job. I believe the last time we saw him, he ran through Unknown Pleasures both sides. And his show was, I think it was 90% Joy Division, maybe a little New Order, but I think it was 90% Joy Division. And he has someone backing him up on bass, so sometimes he plays bass and sings, and sometimes he just sings. But it's just wonderful, and I'm glad. And he tours a lot because I think that there's a real hunger out there for people that want to see. That never got a chance to see Joy Division and want to hear those songs live. So I can't recommend his show enough. It's just fantastic, and it's emotional. It's just wonderful. And he's coming back to Orlando in June of 2025, so I'm looking forward to that. But I know he plays England a lot, and he tours the world, and I can't recommend his show enough. If you love Joy Division and you haven't seen Peterhook, go see Peterhook. You'll love it. Now, Joy Division's first show in London was December 27th, 1978. I did not go to this show, and maybe I hadn't heard of them yet. I think I had, but I didn't go to this show. And it's funny, just the day before Boxing Day, I went to go see PIL's first show, which was amazing. As I said, London, I just thought, oh my God, London moves so fast. They've got a whole new musical genre going on compared to what was going on in LA at the time. And I just wanted to read from Peter Hook's book of the first London show. He says they got a scathing review. Nick Tester from Sounds writes, Joy Division tried to be a grim group, but I just grinned. This retracted grimness is alienating, but not for intended provocative or creative reasons. And then he goes on to say, an off night maybe, but Joy Division's lack of an enlivening approach could be improved by an all-round sharper, articulate stance and musical method. Joy Division could be a good band if they placed more emphasis on poise than pose. So I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds like he thinks they were just kind of posing and trying to be grim, but I don't know. It doesn't sound like the reviewer liked him, and Peter Hook was not pleased with the review. So the next time that Joy Division played London was in 1979, March 1st. They came back to the Hope and Anchor. I think the Hope and Anchor is still a venue. I didn't go to that show, but I did go to the next one, which was their third gig in London. And this is all according to Peter Hook's book. And it was March 4th, 1979. So this is the first show that I went to. And they opened up for The Cure at the Marquee. So, and I remember it very well. I had already seen The Cure, can't remember where, but we had seen them, my roommate and I had seen them somewhere where they played with a mod band. It wasn't the Jam, but it was a mod band, and everyone was there to see this band, and not many people were there to see The Cure, but we liked The Cure, and we talked to them afterwards backstage. They weren't my cup of tea. I liked them, but they were a little too kind of pop for me. I've always liked sort of a harder sound. So when I went to this show, I wouldn't have gone if Joy Division wasn't opening for them. I was there to really see Joy Division and not to see The Cure. And it's funny because, and I hope I don't get emotional there, but it's funny because I think John Peel had played them on the radio already. Well, he did, because he already had done one John Peel session with them. But especially with Joy Division, maybe with a lot of bands, but you don't feel the power until you see them live. And I'll never forget when and I went to the concert, I went to the show by myself, And I'll never forget being in the Marquee, and when they started, I just couldn't believe how powerful their sound was. Peterhook, that booming bass, and he always performed sort of with his legs sort of spread apart, and he just looked great. And Bernard, his guitar was just amazing, and I love Stephen's drumming. I mean, the whole thing was just incredible, and I love their image too. I love the way Stephen would wear a tie sometimes, and Bernard as well. I mean, I was overwhelmed. I really was. So this was their set list. They started with exercise 1, and then She's Lost Control, Shadow Play, Leaders of Men, Insight, Glass, Digital, Ice Age, and then they ended with Transmission. I mean, quite a set. Most of the times I saw Joy Division, She's Lost Control, I would say, was kind of their hit, or the song that the audience was most familiar with, and then followed by Shadow Play and Transmission. For me, anyway, those were the 3 songs that I was kind of the most familiar with, especially She's Lost Control. And I remember when I first saw iancurtis dance, I didn't even know that he had health problems, that he had seizures. I guess he had epilepsy, but I really thought there was something wrong with him at this show because of the way he danced. I know it sounds silly, but I'd never seen him dance before, and I'd never, they weren't on TV or anything, and I'd never seen them. And when he started dancing, I really did think something was wrong with him. And just the sort of the herky-jerky kind of movements. And it's funny, after reading Peterhook's book, he says that there were several times when he did have a seizure on stage. He said that it was usually towards the end of the set, and then they would have to sort of carry him off, and maybe they could bring him back on stage. Sometimes maybe they couldn't. I don't remember exactly, but he did say that he, especially as time went on, he was having more and more seizures. And sometimes it did happen when he was on stage. But when I saw him, when I first started seeing him dance, I actually thought there was something wrong with him. I know it sounds silly, but I did. But I loved the way he danced, and I just never seen anything so. They just blew me away. And Peterhook said that after he saw the Sex Pistols, he was just silent and gobsmacked. Well, that's the way I felt when I saw Joy Division. I was just, as they say in England, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I just couldn't believe how good they were, and it was something. It just felt something so different, so new, and I was just overwhelmed. I really was. I might have stayed to see The Cure. I think I did. And I'll just read a little bit of what Peterhook says about this show. It was exciting being in the Marquee for obvious reasons, and it was really crowded. I do remember it being crowded, but the night was ruined by the fact that we had to drive home afterwards. That is a long drive to Manchester. The Cure never even acknowledged us. Everyone was rocking except us. We just played, then got dragged off to drive home, which was a downer. So he was kind of upset that they had to drive home afterwards, and he said the Cure didn't acknowledge them. But that was the first time I saw Joy Division, March 4th, 1979. And I still remember that feeling of being in that crowded Marquee and thinking, wow, this is something. This is probably one of the best bands I'm ever going to see in my life. And I wanted to see them again, and I did. The second time I saw Joy Division was on May 17th, 1979. They played, and this is the next time they played London, they played what they called a factory sample night. And I remember that because I remember thinking that, oh, that's neat, because Factory Records were promoting not just Joy Division, but other bands. And I liked the other bands that they had on the label. On this night, Joy Division, and they played I think it's called Acklam Hall. I'm not sure where that is in London. And they were supported by John Dowie, I don't remember him, A Certain Ratio, and Orchestral Maneuvers. I do remember the show because it was sort of it wasn't just a Joy Division show, it was a kind of a Factory Records show. And I remember thinking, oh, that's neat that they promote other bands. Peter Hook doesn't say what the set list was, but he says that this would have been the first gig for Final Solution, which was Colin Favor, who went on to become a big DJ. And then he says OMD also had a guitar stolen and were very upset. I liked Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, and I still do, and I liked A Certain Ratio too. So so I remember going to that show, and I remember now I knew what they were like live. I wasn't quite as afraid when I saw iancurtis dancing. I knew that he wasn't having a seizure. I knew that was the way he danced, and I just remember loving it. I think it was a crowded venue, and I loved the fact that it wasn't just Joy Division, that it was other bands that were kind of similar in the way that, they weren't punk bands. They were exploring new sounds, and music was sort of moving forward, and I loved it. All right, the next time I saw Joy Division was also the next time they played London. It was June 17th, 1979, of course. Unknown Pleasures had just come out 3 days before, and I'm not sure I had the album quite yet, but I know I got it pretty soon after it came out. And this show was at Royalty Theatre, Kingsway, London, and they were supported by supporting John Cooper Clarke and a group called Fashion Set. I don't remember Fashion Set, but I do remember seeing Joy Division with John Cooper Clarke, and he was very famous back then. I remember seeing him a lot, either bands supporting him or he was supporting bands, and I liked his poetry. In fact, I have a picture here where I ran into him in LA, and I think this is around 2018 in Silver Lake. He just happened to be at a club, and I said, can I get my picture taken with you? So this show, you can see that they're not they're getting going, but they're not headlining, because according to Peter Hook, they were supporting John Cooper Clarke. And the set list was Atmosphere, Disordered, Digital, I Remember Nothing, Candidate, New Dawn Fades. Oh, I love that song. These Days, Inner Zone, and Transmission. And I believe this is the first time I ever heard New Dawn Fades, because I don't think I had gotten the album yet. And that's still one of my favorite Joy Division songs. I love New Dawn Fades, and Joe loves Joy Division, even though he's a few years younger than me, and he turned me on to Moby's version of New Dawn Fades, and I like that version a lot. And but I do remember being at this show, and it was interesting because he talks about, I'll just read what Peter Hook says about the show. I guess he didn't like this band called Fashion, and they were supposed to go on right before John Cooper Clarke, but they didn't. They had to be the first of the three performers to go on. And he says that, but we ended up being stiffed in London. They left us off the bill and then insisted we go on first. It was bedlam backstage. Rob threatened everybody. The upshot was that we ended up going on before the doors had even opened. It was either that or don't play. We played Atmosphere and Disorder to a completely empty room. And then he says people started coming in during Digital, and then the place filled up. I do remember that because I remember because I wanted to see them, and I knew that they were going to be early on in the bill, and I remember getting in there and thinking, how could I have missed some songs? Because I was like right there when the doors opened. So now I know why, because I always thought, like, how did I miss part of the set? But I know I didn't miss New Dawn Fades, because I remember that night hearing that song and thinking, wow, this band is just the songs that they were writing were just unbelievable. And there were a lot of people there to see them. I actually think there were more people there to see them than John Cooper Clarke. That's what I remember. Yeah, I loved it. So that was June 17th, and that was the third show where I was lucky enough to have seen Joy Division. All right, the fourth time I saw Joy Division was August 2nd, 1979, and they played the YMCA in London. And I remember that because I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. They have shows at YMCA's here in England. And also on the bill were Teardrop Explodes and Echo and the Bunnymen. I like those bands too. And again, I just remember thinking, wow, London really moves fast. I'm sure LA is still just doing straightforward punk. Nothing wrong with that. But London is expanding into different genres and different sounds. I loved it. This was I guess it was a festival. I don't remember that, but I do remember seeing them at the YMCA. The set list that night was Dead Souls. That was the first time I heard Dead Souls. It's like, I mean, that's the thing with Joy Division. They really mixed up their set, and every time you saw them, it wasn't. It was different. They usually always did She Lost Control and Shadow Play. I think those were the two mainstays that I used to always hear. But apart from that, they really mixed up their set. You usually heard songs that you'd never heard before that weren't even on the album. So this was the set list that night: Dead Souls, Disorder, Wilderness, Autosuggestion, Transmission, Day of the Lord, She's Lost Control, Shadow Play, Atrocity Exhibition, and Insight. And they got a review from Adrian Thurls in NME. He writes, "The truth is they were phenomenal. The most physical hard rock group I've ever seen since Gang of Four." They were kind of a hard rock group. That's what I loved about them. They were, Bernard's guitar playing was heavy. And I always like bands with heavy bass, and I always love Peterhook's bass playing. So I think that's a good categorization. I think that they were kind of a hard rock band with a hard rock band in a new era. I just love them. So I didn't see every show that they played in London, and I'm grateful for the shows that I did see, but when I look at the ones that I missed, of course I think, like, what's, stupid Maggie. But in August 13th, they played the Nashville Rooms. I never saw them there, and that's when Anique Honoré, is that how you pronounce it? Who became Ian Curtis's girlfriend. That's the first time that she saw the band, and that was August 13th at the Nashville Rooms. And then they also played in Walthamstow. I don't know if that's I guess that's London, and I didn't go to that one either, and that was August 24th. And Peter Hook says that afterwards Anique interviewed the band. I guess she was a journalist. I think she was from Belgium. One thing I learned also in Peter Hook's book was that I learned a lot about Ian Curtis. He obviously he had very severe health problems, and because of his epilepsy and the drugs that he had to take to try to contain the seizures, the medication made him impotent, so that he wasn't able to perform sexually. So even though he was unfaithful to his wife, I'm sure, as most people know, he was married and he had a young baby. Peter Hook said that he wasn't able to perform sexually. I mean, obviously he still was unfaithful because he was with Anique and stayed with her a lot when he came to London. But he wasn't in good shape physically because of the epilepsy and because of the medication. And the other thing I learned in Peter Hook's book as well, or one of the other things I learned, was that Ian Curtis had tried to commit suicide before. As everyone knows, he died in May, I think it was May 18th, 1980. But he had tried to commit suicide, I believe, a couple months before by overdosing on some pills. So he wasn't in a good place mentally or physically. It's so sad, so tragic. So the next show, so I missed those two shows, but the next show I saw, which was the 5th time that I saw Joy Division, was August 31st. They played the Electric Ballroom. I love the Electric Ballroom. As I said in the beginning of this video, I saw Sid Vicious White Kids, August 1978 at the Electric Ballroom. And I've seen lots of shows there, and I'm so glad it's still going. It's still a live venue. So many live venues have gone by the wayside, but Electric Ballroom is still going strong. So I did go to this show, Electric Ballroom, August 31st. And at this time, they started to sort of headline more and more and have other bands opening up for them. And the opening bands were Certain Ratio, Scritti Politti, and Monochrome Set. I remember all those bands. Great bands. And Peter Hook writes, "It was a great gig, this one. I was very impressed that the Monochrome Set singer was an Indian prince." I remember liking the Monochrome Set as well. The set list included The Sound of Music, Wilderness Colony, Day of the Lord, Shadow Play, Transmission, Inner Zone, Disorder, She's Lost Control, and Insight. So you can see they, as I said, every show, pretty much every show, they were going to play Shadow Play. But every show during the time I saw them, you usually heard She's Lost Control and Shadow Play and Transmission. So that was, I remember that gig was crowded. What I liked about seeing them is that they had such great opening bands. I mean, it was just enough to see Joy Division, but when you went to go see them, you usually knew, oh, you were gonna hear like another cutting edge band. A great band, and that's what I liked about them as well. So so that night they had some great supporting acts. So that was August 31st, 1979. Right around this time, September 15th, 1979, Joy Division were really getting going, getting more famous. And they appeared on the national show called Something Else, and they played She's Lost Control and Transmission. And I'll play a clip from that here.
Secrets in the past, I said
And then by September 22nd, 1979, they came back and played the Nashville Rooms again. I didn't go to that show. I never saw them at the Nashville Rooms, and I never saw them at the Moonlight Club in West Hampstead, which was a small club. So I don't know why, but I know certain places I guess I wasn't as on top of it as I should have been, but I'm grateful for what I saw. So they played the Nashville Rooms September 22nd, but I missed that one. All right, so starting in October of 1979, the Joy Division went on a tour supporting the Buzzcocks, and they played a lot of dates all over Britain, and but they took a break during the tour. The tour went on from October 2nd all the way until November 10th, and they took a break during the tour, and they came back to the Electric Ballroom and played a show on their own, and I remember this one as well. And they were supported by the Distractions. I think they were also a band on Factory Records, and A Certain Ratio. I really liked A Certain Ratio. The set list that night was I Remember Nothing, Love Will Tear Us Apart. This was probably the first time I ever heard Love Will Tear Us Apart. I just couldn't believe it when I first heard that song live. I just thought, wow, what melodies they could write, not just guitar riffs and beautiful bass lines, but what a melody in that song. And the lyrics were just so painful and so deep. I'm sure it was very autobiographical, because Iancurtis was obviously going through a lot during this time. You know, he was with Anique, he had his health problems, and his wife and baby back home. So they did Love Will Tear Us Apart, Wilderness, Colony, Inside, Day of the Lords, Shadow Play, She's Lost Control, Transmission Disorder, Atrocity, Exhibition, and Inner Zone. So pretty long set at the Electric Ballroom. And as I said, I remember hearing Love Will Tear Us Apart for the first time live, and it sounds like it was at this show. I don't think I had been to a show before and heard it, and I knew as soon as I heard that song that this band was going to be remembered as one of the greats, and I was just so happy to be there and to be living in London and just enjoying everything that London had to offer. And I was so happy they came to London a lot. You know, they weren't a London band, but they did visit London a lot. So it was, I was so happy about that. And I'll just read a brief comment that Peterhook makes at this time. He says, something I remember about the Buzzcocks tour is that they played the same set every night, whereas we always varied ours. I remember that. They, as I said before, they changed their set a lot. We did it to keep ourselves interested so that all the songs got an airing, to try to find out that ultimate moment, and sometimes, again, just to be bloody awkward. If the audience were really wild, we'd start with I Remember Nothing, just to wind them up. One thing that punk taught you was to be challenging, always to break the rules. I love that. Yeah, you never knew what you were going to hear when you saw them. I mean, as I said, I knew that I'd probably hear She's Lost Control and Shadow Play and Transmission, but you really, they mix the setup a lot, and I love them for it. So they played their last, they toured with, as I said, with the Buzzcocks until November 10th at the Rainbow, and I was at that show. So the last day of the Buzzcocks tour was November 10th, and this is the seventh time that I saw Joy Division. And they played 2 nights at the Rainbow Theater, opening up for the Buzzcocks. They played November 9th as well. And on November 9th, The set list was The Sound of Music, Shadow Play, New Dawn Fades, Colony, Insight, Love Will Tear Us Apart, She's Lost Control, and Transmission. And the night that I went, I don't know why I didn't go 2 nights. You know, it's funny, I look back at these shows, and as I said, I feel happy that I went to them, but then I also think, like, why didn't I go to more? I could have seen them on the 9th and the 10th. But anyway, I went November 10th, so this is the last day of the Buzzcocks tour, and they played Dead Souls. God, such a great song. Wilderness, 24 Hours, Day of the Lords, These Days, Inner Zone, Disorder, and Atrocity Exhibition. And I remember it very well. I went by myself, like I went to a lot of shows, not just Joy Division, but you know, a lot of shows by myself. And I believe the Rainbow Theater, I believe it had seats, and if I remember correctly. And I'd never seen the Buzzcocks, so I thought, oh, this is interesting. I can see the Buzzcocks as well as Joy Division. So Joy Division came out, and they start with Dead Souls, and I was already familiar with the song, even though I don't think it was on record yet, and I loved it. But I remember thinking, like, oh, they're not doing their usual set. And I'm not sure I knew the song 24 Hours or These Days either. You know, they didn't do She's Lost Control, they didn't do Shadow Play, they didn't do Transmission. Those were the kind of the 3 songs I was used to hearing. And they didn't do any of that, but I loved it. I loved the fact that they experimented with their set list. And one of the things I remember about their set was that the Buzzcocks audience didn't like them at all. The Buzzcocks, their audience was very young, at least at this show, very young and very female, mostly female. I felt like I was almost at a Bay City Rollers concert. It was mostly kind of 16-year-old girls. And they didn't like Joy Division at all. And I believe it was seats. And I remember thinking, like, oh, no one's standing up. I can't believe it. I mean, you know, when they came out doing Dead Souls, how can you not stand up to that brilliant song with the heavy guitar and the lyrics, They Keep Calling Me. I stood up right away, and I thought, I don't care if I'm blocking somebody's view. I think I moved over to the aisle after a couple of songs, but the thing I remember about that, apart from meeting the band, and I'll get to that in a second, was that it was a very different crowd than the other shows I'd been to. It was very much a Buzzcocks audience, and the Buzzcocks audience, at least the ones that I saw, they didn't seem to take to Joy Division at all. They didn't stand up. They weren't interested. So I'm standing there and I'm dancing and I'm loving it. I'm hearing some songs I'd never heard before. And I didn't care if I didn't hear She's Lost Control. That was perfectly fine with me that they mixed up their set and they played different songs. I absolutely loved it. It was a short set, I think, because they were opening for the Buzzcocks, a shorter set than I was used to. But I absolutely loved it. But the Buzzcocks audience did not. So after that, I thought, well, I'll stay and see the Buzzcocks, but I also had tickets to go see the Psychedelic Furs the same night. And that's kind of how London was, at least for me, between 1978 and 1980. It was kind of like an embarrassment of riches. There were so many bands to see, and I loved, Joy Division were my favorite. But I did like the Psychedelic Furs, so I thought, well, I can go see this. They were headlining at the Electric Ballroom. I remember it was a Saturday night, and I thought, you know, I'll see Joy Division. They're opening up for the Buzzcocks. I'll catch a couple songs of the Buzzcocks, and then I'll go across town to the Electric Ballroom, one of my favorite venue, and I'll see the Psychedelic Furs. And so I watched a couple Buzzcocks songs, and they were, you know, they're talented. I couldn't deny them that, but they weren't for me. They were a little too pop, kind of pop punk, I guess, and I liked them, but I didn't love them, and so I think I just watched 2 or 3 songs, and so then I walked out. I'm walking out by myself to the lobby of the Electric Ballroom, and I'll never forget this. It's like it was yesterday. I'm walking out past the bar. There's no one around, and I'm walking towards the door, and I look to the left, and I look back at the bar because I see 4 guys standing there, and I look, and there's Joy Division standing by themselves, looking so cool in their gray and you know, dark gray and light gray shirts and trousers, and Steven, the drummer, he was kind of at the middle of the bar. I think he was ordering something. It was a long bar, and then the other 3 of them were kind of off at the corner of the bar, but there was no one at the bar. There was absolutely no one, just Joy Division. And I turned and looked, and I thought, oh my God, there's Joy Division. They're just standing there. And it's funny because when I read this book, Peter Hook says in the book that they were always playing pranks on each other, the Buzzcocks and Joy Division. And he says that this last night they played a prank on them, and they put some, I think, live mice or live rats in their tour bus, and then they also put some live maggots on stage. He writes in the book that they put some maggots on the floor of the stage while they were playing, and then the maggots started crawling up some curtains behind them. So this was the night that they were doing that, because it was the last night of the tour. And it's funny, after I read the book, I thought, well, maybe the roadies are the ones that put the mice and the maggots and the, you know, on stage and on the tour bus, because the 4 guys, they looked like they were just having a drink after the show. They didn't look like they were running around doing anything. But anyway, maybe they had done it before, but he talks about that prank there. So I'm there, and I think, oh my God, there they are. Well, I'm gonna, you know, I'm gotta rush off and go see the Psychedelic Furs, but I'm gonna go and tell them that, you know, I loved their music, and and I thought it was a great show. So I go up to Steven, because he's by himself, and as I said, I think he's ordering a drink or waiting for the bartender to give him a drink. And I go up to Steven, and I just say, hi. I said, I just want to tell you that I thought that was a great show. I love your band. I try to go see you at any time I can. And then I think I said, when are you playing next? And I think he said that they weren't playing London anymore that year, but that they were going to come back at the beginning of the year, but he wasn't sure when. It was something like that. So, and I said, yeah, I always like to ask, you know, when are you playing next? And then I said, and then he said something to me. He says, are you getting a drink? So I think he was ordering a drink, and so I'm not sure if he was asking to pay for my drink or, but I think he said, are you getting a drink, or would you like a drink? And stupid me, I said, no, I gotta run. I'm going to see the Psychedelic Furs. And he says, where are they playing tonight? And I said, they're playing at the Electric Ballroom. And he says, oh, that's a good venue. I said, yeah, I like that venue. And then I said, and then the other thing I said to him was, wow, you played a different set tonight. There were some songs that I wasn't quite familiar with. And I always remember he said, this audience doesn't like us much, so we can kind of play what we want. It doesn't really matter. And I said, I'm surprised. Their audience is very kind of teenage, or something like that, I said. He says, but that's okay. It just means we can play whatever. And I like that. So, you know, because I guess the audience weren't into them if they played a brand new song, or if they played She's Lost Control, it didn't matter. So that was about the end of the conversation. And then I said, well, I got to run. It was nice to meet you, and it was a great show. And then the other three, Peter and Bernard and Ian, they're kind of conversing with themselves. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to say, great show, and run off. And so I went, just a few steps away, and I said, hey, I just want to say great show, and I kind of start walking off. And then I'll never forget iancurtis. He turns and he kind of turns in with a smile, and he says, hello. And I don't know why I didn't stand and talk to them. I'm such an idiot. And then I said, hi. I said, I gotta run. I said, I just want to say it's a great show tonight, and love you guys. And then I'll never forget Ian saying to me, and he was literally like this far away from me, with his big sad eyes. He said, "Oh," he says, "you're not staying." He said, "That's too bad." He says, "Well then, hello and goodbye." And I'll never forget that. He says hello and goodbye. And I just thought he just seemed so nice and so friendly. And I said, yeah, I gotta run. I said bye, and off I went. But I should have stayed and had a drink with them or chatted with them. That would have been a nice experience. And I look back at it and think, well, at least I said hello. But why didn't I stay? I'm too darn practical. I'm thinking like, oh, I bought a ticket for another show, I gotta run off. But they all seem real friendly, and that was just it was a beautiful night. And I remember I think I took the bus across town to Camden, and I remember thinking, I should have stayed and had a drink with Joy Division. I should have stayed and had a drink with Joy Division, but oh well. Okay, so the next time I saw Joy Division was in 1980, February 8th, 1980. This would have been the 8th time that I saw them in concert, and they played the University of London. And I remember this very well. I just remember thinking, oh, that's neat, they're playing the University of London Union. I guess it was their kind of union hall there. And they were supported by Section 25, A Certain Ratio, and Killing Joke. This is the first time I saw Joy Division with Killing Joke, and I just thought, wow, the music here in London, in Britain, is just amazing. I loved Killing Joke as well. And I think this is the first time I saw them, but it was definitely the first time I saw Killing Joke and Joy Division on the same bill, with Joy Division headlining. The set list that night was Dead Souls, Glass, A Means to an End, 24 Hours, Passover, Insight, Colony, These Days, Love Will Tear Us Apart, Isolation, The Eternal, and Digital. So some of those songs I don't think I had heard before. And I'm just trying to think. I think A Means to an End, I don't think I had heard that one. And I don't think I had heard Passover before either. So that was, I just remember that was a great gig, very crowded. I think Killing Joke were already getting a pretty good following. So you had the two kind of followings together, and it worked much better than with the Buzzcocks. As I said, the Buzzcocks audience didn't seem to like Joy Division at all, but the Killing Joke audience and the Joy Division audience were very similar, and I loved both bands as well, and I loved A Certain Ratio as well too. I don't remember Section 25, but I loved. That was one of my favorite gigs. I really felt like Joy Division were getting really big, and I was so happy for them because they deserved it. I mean, I think that they were, I loved PIL during that time, and I loved Susie and the Banshees, and I loved Killing Joke. But Joy Division, they were, not that it's a competition, but they were just outstanding. They really were. Such an amazing band. And then the next time I saw Joy Division, and this would be the last time I saw them, was not that long afterwards, was February 29th. They played the Lyceum, and I remember that show very well. The Lyceum is a pretty big place. I believe it's near Charing Cross Tube Station. And at this gig, it says they were co-headlining with Killing Joke, and again with Section 25 in a certain ratio. I think this was a bigger venue, and or the biggest venue I had seen them play so far. And I just thought that was, they were really gaining momentum by this time, February 29th, 1980. And the set list was Incubation, probably the first time I heard the song, Wilderness, 24 Hours, The Eternal, Heart and Soul, Love Will Tear Us Apart, Isolation, Coma Kino, She's Lost Control These Days, and Atrocity Exhibition. You can see how they really mix up their set, and they're always putting in new songs. They were not stagnant live at all. I think that's why I went to go see them so much. I probably would have gone to see them even if they played the same set every night. But the fact that they didn't made them even more exciting and just brilliant. And this was a very crowded gig, and it was great. They were great. They were on fire. Yeah, so I saw Joy Division 9 times. It's interesting to go back over it and think about the shows and how I felt at the time. I loved every one of them. They were all different. And from the first one at the Marquee, where I was afraid Iancurtis was having some kind of seizure on stage with the way he danced, to the last show I saw at the Lyceum, where they co-headlined with Killing Joke, February 29th, 1980. It was crowded. It was, you could just tell that they were going to be playing bigger and bigger places, and I was so happy for them, and I just thought that they were definitely one of the best bands that I was probably ever going to be lucky enough to ever see in my lifetime. I did miss some shows after that. They played the Moonlight Club. I believe I tried to get tickets for these. They played 3 nights at the Moonlight Club, April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Apparently, Iancurtis had a seizure on stage at one of those shows. Anyway, I do remember those shows, and I believe I remember, if memory serves me well, that I tried to get tickets, but they were sold out right away. That's what I remember anyway, because I remember thinking, oh, maybe I should just show up and try to get in, and then I didn't. And then they also opened up for on April 4th as well. So they played the Moonlight Club later that night in West Hampstead, and they opened up for the Stranglers at the Rainbow Theater on April 4th. I did not go to that show, and I don't remember knowing about that show. So that was one that I missed. But I'm grateful for the shows that I saw, and I don't know if I can describe what it was like to see them live, but they were really one of the most powerful bands I think that I've ever seen and will ever be lucky enough to see. They were from their, the power of all the instruments, and then Iancurtis with his voice and the way he danced. I mean, it was incredible, and you knew every time you went to go see them that they were probably going to debut a new song that you never heard before, and that made it all the more exciting, because they were really writing incredible songs. So what happened after that, April, according to Peterhook's book, April 6th was when Iancurtis took an overdose of pills. I think he had to go to the hospital, and then and I guess they were supposed to play the Scala Cinema in London, but it was it was canceled because of Ian's poor health. But apparently he went to the show. There were some other groups playing, Durruti Column, and I remember Durruti Column, and a certain race show, and Section 25. Apparently his health was so poor that he couldn't perform, but apparently he was there in the audience for a little while. The very last gig they ever played was May 2nd, 1980 in Birmingham, and that show is also on the I believe it's on the Still album, or some of the songs are on the live Still album. And I love that album. I love any live albums that they did, because they were so incredible live. As everybody knows, things did not go well. They ended up canceling a lot of gigs in Liverpool, in Edinburgh, at Albert Hall. And I think it was all because of Ian Curtis's declining health, and probably his declining mental state. And at this time, my friend Sue and I, we were planning to go back to LA. We'd been in London for 2 years, and I loved it. I still love London. I ended up going back in the 90s and living there for 7.5 years. But we decided that we were going to go back. It was a difficult decision, but we didn't have work permits, and I was working, as I said, at Topshop, and I loved it. But I felt like, maybe I should go back home and try to do something a little more productive. I didn't know what that was, but I ended up joining a band called Community FK and doing some interesting things. So it wasn't a bad decision to go home. But I remember anyway thinking that, and one of the reasons why the singer in Community FK, his name is Patrick Mata, one of the reasons why he wanted me in the band and was so impressed with me, it wasn't just because I could play keyboards, but it was because my love of Joy Division, and he loved Joy Division, so we had that in common. But we had second thoughts about returning to LA because we love London so much. And I'll never forget my roommate Sue telling me, she said, Joy Division are going on tour, and they're going to be playing in LA. And I have the dates here. They were going to be playing in LA at the Starwood, which was a club I loved, on June 9th. And then they were going to play the next night at a place called Flippers, which I think was a roller disco later. And they were going to play there on the 10th. So they were going to do 2 shows in LA. And I remember Sue saying that, because I think we were coming home right around the 1st of June. I remember her saying, she says, it's probably going to be tough going back to LA, but just think, we're going to go and see Joy Division again. And that's going to be fun. That will be like our homecoming. And then, as everyone knows, May 18th, Ian Curtis died. And it still is such a tragic thing to me, not just because he was such a young man and a talented man, and he had people that around him that loved him, but he had so much ahead of him, and I guess he was in a mental state that he didn't think he did. So I just can't imagine what was going through his head, through his mind at that time, to take his life the way he did. But I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. As a fan, you know how it is. You don't feel like you know someone personally, but you know them through their music and through his beautiful lyrics. And that's the way I felt like I knew him, and I loved Ian Curtis. And when he died, I knew that the band died as well. I knew they would never come back, and they didn't. There was never a Joy Division after Ian Curtis died. because he was such an important part of the band. Yeah, May 18th. It was a very dark day for, I'm sure, iancurtis's family and friends, and for fans like me around the world. And so I guess I'll end the video here. I knew this was going to be a hard one, because I loved that band so much. And even though I saw them 9 times, I wish I'd seen them more. I wish I'd seen them more. And I'm sorry I didn't have a drink with Stephen and Ian and Bernard and Peter. But I'm just glad I enjoyed them, and I enjoyed their music, and I still do. I play Joy Division almost every day. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and this is my tribute to the band, and my way of saying hello, goodbye to Ian. Hello, goodbye. And I'll end the video with Joy Division. I believe this is them playing live at the Manchester Apollo, doing transmission. And iancurtis, wherever you are, I hope you're dancing to the radio. I hope you are. Thanks for watching. I'll be seeing you.